Okay, we're going to get started with our last presentation. Next presentation is Paperless Procurement Office. Karen Bitsu, CPO, has over 20 years experience in public contracting for government, including a wide array of products, services, construction, and consulting services. She has worked for agencies at Washington State, including county, city, transportation, and library districts, and has served as a disadvantaged business enterprise liaison and small business advocate, while supporting greater efficiency through standardization of documents and processes. Today, Karen is procurement and records manager for the city of Linwood in Washington State. Karen is a promoter of continuous process improvement, engaging staff and customers to develop and deliver even better services. She has used these processes to generate improved processes for her agency over the past 15 years, using a variety of tools to achieve success. Please join me in welcoming Karen.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I've never been accused of being too quiet, so I get a little excited sometimes when I'm talking. So if your eardrums are getting like this, give me some kind of signal so I know to behave myself. So you got a little bit of background on me. I've been in a lot of different kinds of public agencies for, I love that it says more than 20 years. I'm just not counting anymore. Right? Just not going to count them anymore. But what I've seen during that period of time is an enormous amount of change. When I started with the library districts in the beginning of the 90s, we lit off our first global for the libraries. We had 22 libraries in the district. We lit off the first global database and barcoded our books, and we thought we were so cool. We just thought we died and gone to heaven. And in about 94, I remember rolling out fax machines. The ones where the paper came out and curled up and fell on the floor. Do you remember those machines? If you do, yeah. You know that they used to tell you not to put them in the file cabinets, right? Do you know why? Anybody know why? It was called thermal paper. Do you remember this? It was coated in sugar. And the image was burning the sugar onto the page. So if you left it in the file cabinet too long, it would just disintegrate and rot. I think we've come a long way from there. And fax machines are virtually disappearing, but they were cutting edge technology 30 years ago. They were a very cool thing to have. Today we've got computers. How many computers did you bring with you? 2, 4, right? So one of these days we're going to be really cool and only have one, and you go, beam me up, Scotty, right? Not quite there yet, but we can move our institutions one step at a time. So whether you've got great systems or not so great systems, there's a lot of ways that you can help bring efficiencies to your agencies. So we're going to kind of walk our way through a lot of those options today. So why would you even want to go paperless? It might seem obvious, but some of the most common reasons that you want to do this is that you want to increase transparency. If you happen to be in the customer service presentation a little earlier in this room, you heard a gentleman who swore he knew nothing about public procurement at all. And one of the first things he said when he started researching about us and our work, transparency came up again and again and again. The whole reason public purchasing exists is because we were supposed to make contract award transparent. We were going to not be doing backroom deals between, you know, the mayor or your county executive and his favorite neighbor or brother-in-law. We needed to get out there publicly and award them fairly and transparently. Being online, being electronic makes things more transparent for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's easier to post it to things like the web, but more importantly, even if it's not out on the web, you can retrieve it quickly. That's a big deal. And that promotes efficiencies. The efficiencies can be as simple as knowing where something is. How many of you started out with file cabinets, hip deep? And a few of you probably still have some hip deep piles of file cabinets. Yep, you betcha. That's not at all uncommon. It's still around, and a lot of agencies are still there. And if you're still there, it's not your fault. You know, it takes investment by your agency to get you from point A to point B. But you can help show people how that's possible. And by showing them in little increments, you can probably sell them on a better system down the line. So you want to simplify your processes, and you want to be able to do good analysis and reporting. Everybody who talks about performance measures these days, right? You hear that all over the place. What's your spend analysis look like? How many of you are actually doing spend analysis on your agency? A few, a couple of hands went halfway up. I get it. I do. I remember Kathy going to one of the Washington state counties, calling me up and saying, you won't believe it, but I can't even figure out what my spend is on my vendors. And she's not alone, right? It's not easy to do. And if it is easy to do, you'd have already done it. Standardize your record keeping. We pretty much have that in most of everybody's working on a PC. So we've got some kind of network. How many of you have an organized filing system for your contracts or POs or solicitations? Oh, good. Lots more hands. That's terrific. That's good. How many of you have one, but you wouldn't call it organized? Okay, now you're lying. Now you're just lying. You know, I work like heck to do that because my other hat at Linwood is to be the records manager as well. We don't have a formal separate city clerk. And so it's a little distributed in our agency. And I know for a fact that as much as we try to use standardized naming and numbering, and I know I got folders I wish I didn't have to admit to. Yeah. And you're going to save costs. This is why you want to go through this process. Okay. How many of you have a requisition that looks like this? Really? Nobody's got paper recs? I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. When I joined Linwood in 2014, they were still using paper requisitions. And I'm kind of surprised that nobody else in the room has them left anymore. How many of you recognize a form like this? Alrighty. And you don't miss them? No, not so much. The one I left behind in King County, we went live with a system in 2012, had, Vicki, are you in the room? I don't know if I see her back there. I believe that it had about 9 different colors, goldenrod, green, pink, red, whatever. And we were still using that on an impact printer. It had carbon paper in between the PO pages. Wow, and that was the end of 2011 when we quit doing that. So, you know, you wouldn't be alone if you were the only one still processing paper. Okay, so the approval on transparency. The biggest deal is often the approval workflow. Doesn't matter if you're trying to get a rec approved, a contract approved, a P-card transaction approved. If it's not electronic, it's on a piece of paper, how are you going to know where that is? And God knows you don't want to create a form to track where it is because then that'll get lost. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah, okay. So that's not going to work. And then the next question that comes right behind, whether it's paper or electronic, is, do I even have the authority to do this? Of course, we often have the opposite. How many of you had the problem that somebody did something they didn't have the authority to do? Yeah, no, we're not doing that. But an awful lot of times things will sit in somebody's inbox because they're intimidated. They don't know whether or not they can sign it. So that can be a mystery and that can slow things down. Solicitations. So when you get those out and in a place where everybody can see them, usually it's posting those to your website or to a cooperative website if you have access, then you're going to increase participation. That's going to drive down costs. It's going to make your agency look and feel more transparent than it is already. That increases the concept that we're being fair, and that is, after all, what we're trying to do. And of course, it makes them accessible. The contracts are now available for internal and external review. How many of you in the last 12 months have responded to a public records request? Yeah, the more of these things we get posted out there publicly, we can just say to people, it's already out there. Help yourself. You see more and more agencies are doing that. Anybody posting their contracts to the web now? I see some half, that's cool. Yeah, I'm posting my interlocal agreements on the web. Anybody else doing that? Washington State hands just went up, yeah. I get it. Okay, here's about the efficiencies edge of it, right? Portabilities, when it's electronic, You can do it on the go. I've been sitting in the back room trying to pay attention to the presentations while approving things online, right? It's pretty sweet. It means you can keep going. And the newest iteration of the financial system that we have is supposed to take us to a more app-friendly for your mobile phone. We'll see. And we haven't done that upgrade yet. I'll let you know how that goes. Retrieving records and information really quickly. The faster you can do that, the faster you can get on to the next thing you're doing. And even better yet, if you can make it possible for your internal customers to open up that contract database, see the expiration date, see when it got extended, maybe see line item detail on what the pricing looks like, and open up an attachment that shows them the contract document, you just made it self-service. That impresses customers when you can achieve it. It drives users then to using those contracts. And that's what we need. We need to have our volume on our contracts to leverage pricing and good terms and conditions. And you can troubleshoot the issues when you can see them. Makes it faster. You can see what your end user's seeing on their screen when they're in a building miles away or just across the other side of the building. That is really helpful. Oh, hello. I like this one better. We'll go with this one. Reporting and record keeping. If you are in a management position for the contracts, the POs, the P-card transactions, and other things going through your office, you have to remember that you cannot possibly manage what you can't see. You might know that your employees are really busy and it's unfair to give all the new contracts to you when you're not as busy, but do you really know if your workload's even? How do you know how the performance is on this employee if the workload's not organized in a way you can see it? It's an important piece. It lets you see the approval workload trails. So when an auditor shows up and says, well, how do I know that's an approved transaction? You're not digging around looking for a signature on a piece of paper and then you think, okay, I have no idea who signed that. I can't read that. I might as well have been a physician because I can't read that signature, right? So you don't know who's signing things, but when you get this stuff online, you're going to be able to look it up immediately and let them see that. You can do that spend analysis. You can find out whether or not you've done too much contracting with that supplier, and now you need to be doing a bid. Maybe before it was below your competitive threshold, and now it's more. The only way you can see that is if you can run those kinds of analysis on your vendor records. And your vendor performance. Are they delivering on time? Are they delivering on the prices they put in their contract? Are the invoice prices different than what the contract prices say? Again, trying to do that with paper would consume probably all your workload. Okay, so what can you do to go paperless? Well, paperless requisitions, according to the that very technical survey I did a moment ago, nobody's got paper recs left in their world. So we'll skip over that one pretty quickly. And can I presume there's no paper POs being sent out? Okay, there we go. Okay, so we got a little, they're kind of electronic. Are you producing them electronically? But then you might be mailing them out or something, right? Okay, gotcha. Print them, sign them, and then scan them in. I can solve that in 5 words or less. I can solve that problem. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, receipts, return authorizations. If you've got folks who are tracking inventory, they're going to be doing a lot of credits and return authorizations. You need to be able to see that electronically, and that's possible as well. Vendor registrations. How much do we hear from vendors what a pickle it is for them to get registered with you and you and you and you and me? It's, you know, drives small businesses right out of our participation. They don't have the time to do that. So by getting those things online and getting your vendor registration into a common area where they can really leverage their time can make a big difference for them. Advertising and distributing solicitations. Everybody posting their stuff to the web these days? Yeah, pretty much. I'd say it's a good half of the room, easily. How many of you are printing and mailing them out? So if you're not printing and mailing them out, are you emailing them? Cool. That counts. That's electronic. Okay, then we're talking about receiving bids and proposals electronically, right? How many of you are doing that? Oh, nice. I'm just trying to get off the ground with that one. So there's your full disclaimer. I'm not doing all this stuff either, right? None of us, very few of us are going to be doing all of this. I'm getting ready to, I hope by the end of this year, to be receiving bids and proposals electronically. Not quite there yet. Contracts and P-card transactions. You guys signing your contracts electronically? How many are using something like VeriSign or DocuSign or something? Good, that's a good chunk of the room. That's probably a good fourth of the room doing that. How many of you are receiving invoices and then making your payments electronically? Oh, not bad, not bad. I'm receiving them electronically through email, but we are not, I think we're only, our AP's only at about 30, maybe 35% EFT. Not as much as it could be. Asset tracking. How many of you touch fixed assets or small and attractive assets? Not very many. I'll probably skim over that one pretty fast today. Okay, so what's the building block for making sure that your office doesn't look like this? I will tell you that there are little square posties on my desk as we speak. Doesn't quite look like this, but there's a few. So what are the building blocks? How do you make a paperless system function? Well, you probably know, because at one level or another, you're all compliance officers. It's all about the authorities. You have to know who has the authority to do what for your public agency. And what are the tools that you already have? Those are one of the pieces that you have to understand. What are you working with? Because you're going to know what your baseline is to know where you can make those reasonable improvements. How are you going to manage that change? How many of you think your public agencies like change? Yeah, mine either. Mine either. But if you manage it well, you can catch those flies with some honey. You can be like, I'm going to make this so much easier for you. And if you show them that it can be easier, they'll follow you to the next change and the next one after that. So how you do that change is really critical to the success. And you got to listen to and incorporate the feedback from your customers. We don't live in the same procurement world that I started in, where we really were gatekeepers. I remember an employee that I had used to say, my way or the highway. And she meant it. Oh, with all her little heart. She meant it. Much of our careers have been spent convincing people that they're our customers, that we are not a gauntlet for them to run. So make sure when you're doing these changes, they're part of that success program. Get their feedback and listen. And prioritize the work. Don't start with the biggest, most impossible tasks. Find some small wins and build on them. Oh, that was interesting. Okay, cool. Wow. What's this? Okay. Ooh. Okay, me and technology are not that good of friends. So, okay, we're going to start with the authorities for a very simple reason. Everything, whether you're building a house or anything else, you have to start with a strong foundation. And the foundation for each of these systems, whether you're looking at fixed assets or requisitions or contracts, is knowing who has the authority to do what. So many of you may already have a delegation of authority piece to your work. How many of you track the signature authorities and the delegations within your agency? Well, good, that's about half of you. And how many of you feel like that's well understood by your departments and agencies? Okay, not so many. That's part of how this can really, really work well for you. So you want to make sure that wherever your delegations start, in my particular case, it's the city council. They own everything. So they then, through our municipal code, have delegated to our mayor, but they delegated it all to the mayor. So when I arrived there, literally everything was going through the mayor's office, requisitions and contracts and P-card transactions, and nearly every dime. I think it was everything over $2,000. How well do you think that was working? Not so good. The good news was they had just elected a new mayor, and she was wide open to listening to my spend analysis for what our departments went. And our directors went from having less than $2,000 of approved authority to about half of them went to $250,000. Of course, then the directors were nervous to sign anything. But they got through it. I remember one of them saying to me once, I'm like, you need to approve this. It's been sitting and sitting, Bill. And he looks at me, he's like, but. I said, it's okay. I promise you it's okay. And he hits click because it was online. And then he said to me, I'm trying to unclench. So, you know, some of them are clenched, and you're going to have to make it possible, make it approachable for them to feel safe, that you have their backs. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to make sure it's an express delegation. This isn't the mayor just saying, oh yeah, go for it, Mary, go for it, Joan. No, you want that written down. You guys know what your different kinds of authorities are? Express, implied. You've been to that NAGB class, good. Okay, so what else it does besides telling that director, manager, whatever, what their authorities are, it tells their staff too. Because you need to be able to put that out there again on your intranet or wherever you put out your forms and information for your organization, that there's the delegation that we gave Bill and Joan and Mary. So the department staff knows where to go. It also helps them know that they don't have authority. So that can be useful to the directors as well. Excuse me. So the other thing that this does for you is create a basis for a system workflow. And those systems can be as simple as Adobe and as complex as Oracle, everywhere in between. But before you can say, I'm going to set up an electronic workflow, you got to have delegation of authority. And I'm sure the one size is going to fit all for your public agency, right? No, of course not. So why? Well, because we had some agencies, our little HR department, I think, is only 6 people. It's a pretty small department. They don't have a ton of contracting. The HR director has 100,000 in authority. But Public Works and Parks and Rec and the police chief, that you get the idea, have $250,000. So it made a significant amount of difference in how well they could operate. But I didn't stop there. I also said, look, I think you guys need to push some of that down to a more operational level. Well, they had just gotten their 250 and they were afraid of that. Took a little while to convince them that they should be delegating that down to their assistant directors, their managers, their supervisors, and through their P-card program in particular, frontline staff. We got there, but it took a little cajoling. So the other piece is that we wanted to make sure it was consistent. If they're approving a requisition and a P-card transaction or a reimbursement or anything else, it was all at the same level. You didn't have to remember that your P-card let you buy $500 worth, but you could sign a requisition for $1,000 and you could sign reimbursements for only $50. Well, for crying out loud. Are you trying to complicate your life? So when I put it forward to the directors that they could simplify things that way, it was pretty well received. They were like, oh, that's brilliant. It's not brilliant. It's just a basic approach of making it simple for them to meet the requirements. And of course, we did this digitally. So here's an example for the actual memo. This one is to our Parks and Recreation department. And there's 2 pieces I wanted to talk to you about in particular with this template. The very first one is the first half of the memo where it talks about the conditions under which the mayor is allowing these delegations. And yes, I made these up. And yes, they gave me a lot of power. So what it says is, first of all, of course it says it's also in our municipal code, you have to have adopted budget, and don't you darn do anything. Then it says, you have to be compliant with our city code. You can't go out and hand out a contract for a 3rd runway at SeaTac. Well, okay, so we don't cover SeaTac, but you can't go contracting for things if you haven't done the proper steps in our city code. Council approval, when it's required, has been secured. And the 4th bullet, my favorite, the procurement requirements for the contract or purchase has been met, which essentially means they got to come through us or they have to know what they're doing and that they've met our requirements. Okay, So if, in those cases where all those 4 bullets have been met, what can Lynn do? So Director Sordell can sign up to $250,000 in contracts, agreements that are reviewed and approved by council or the procurement division for his department. He can approve recs and POs and change order approval authority up to $250,000 for his department. He can do recs, PO change orders for any amount if it references one of my existing contracts. That just drives them back to using our existing contractors. So I got her to give them unlimited authority on their contracts. For our public works folks in particular, this is tremendously useful. They'd go out and put a contract in place for several $1 million on a construction project. And every time they hit a certain threshold, they were going back to the mayor again and again. So this made it easy for him to continue using his existing contracts under her authority. And that also then was the signing authority for their P card purchases in support of their operations. Can you see how valuable this would be? Post them on your website, intranet. I'd post them on the internet if I needed to. So now everybody in those departments knows what their boss can do. So what did we do next? I met with Lynn and the rest of the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Arts folks. And what you see here is him giving delegation to Sarah Olson, who is his assistant director. And she has exactly the same authorities that he has. I convinced him to do that for one simple reason. I said, Lynn, you go on vacation. When you go on vacation, you're going to forget to send your approval authorities to somebody else. Sarah can always be your backup. They loved the idea. Then they did the superintendent of parks, the manager for recreations, and he did as much, some as well, to his executive assistant, Elena. They each have specific thresholds. Some of them are across the board. Some of them are for specific funds. Now they know exactly what it is, and more importantly, so do their supervisors under them. Okay, so how does any of this help you out? So in our system, I don't know if you guys can see that very clearly. Sorry if it's a little bit vague to see. Is this also a laser pointer? No, maybe not. Yes, silver button? I'm not touching it anymore. I already screwed it up enough. Okay, what you've got in the upper left corner is an approval screen. That when I open my, I'm in a system called Munis. It's a Tyler product, but you know, this is really common. I've been in PeopleSoft and several homegrown versions. I've been in Oracle. There'll be some kind of approval page that you see when you open it up. This happens to be a requisition. I can click on, oh, who did that? I'm coming over there. Okay, so what you're seeing there is that the requisition's ready to go. I could click on the link in the upper center part of the screen, and it'll open up that requisition. Go into the line item details. I can see that this is actually a year-end payment to the wastewater treatment plant in Edmonds. So we have some reciprocal work we do. Edmonds is a neighboring city. No brainer. This one's easy enough to approve. I can approve it from this screen. I can check the budget codes. I can check to see whether or not somebody tried to apply tax. And I can do this from my phone, and I can do it from my Surface here in the office. Very, very helpful stuff. Okay, so behind that one that we saw earlier, the Lynn Sordell being he's our Parks Director, and Sarah's our Assistant Director. You can see here's an example of something that they purchased, a payment they were making. In this particular case, this one exceeded $250,000. So it went to them for the first round of approval. One of the two of them, only one of the two had to approve it. And then from there, it went to the mayor's office. Mayor Nicola Smith is backed up by the assistant city manager. And so Art approved that. Or no, sorry, the mayor approved it. She's actually much better. She's one of my best compliant people out there. Then it came to the procurement office, where it was approved by my staff. I also have it set up that if they don't approve stuff within 3 days, it automatically shows up in my approval. If it's broken and they're waiting for something, I can send it back to them. But it lets me know something's aging, which helps my performance stats. Can you see how this stuff would be set up based on the delegations we did earlier? Now, so far, with the exception of the 2 screenshots I showed you in Munis, none of that stuff is relying on the financial system, right? When you looked at these, see the signatures on there? They're all digital. We happen to be using DocuSign. So we're using it internally as well as externally. Okay, so here's an example of throughput. So the PO can be transmitted via email or retrieved by the vendor. Any of you guys have some sort of a vendor self-service program? Not quite yet. There's one in our system, but it will allow them to actually go out and download copies of their own POs if they want. How many of you have a system that automatically sends out a PO? Where's King County? Raise your hand. You got, because I know they've got it working, unless it's not working anymore. But they happen to be an Oracle, and that system, if you set it up so the vendor wants to get a copy of their PO, will email it out automatically. We're still trying to get that set up in the little system I'm in right now. That can be really helpful. Online receiving can replace OK to pay. Guys still seeing OK to pay scribbled on your invoices? Nice. I still have more than a few in my departments. They're doing online receiving, but they're still writing OK to pay. It's like they can't break the habit. It's what did some of the presenters say earlier? That's my drug of choice. I think their drug of choice is writing OK to pay. And then they'll still scribble the budget codes on there and sign it. I'm like, but you just did that in the system. There's only so much you can do to help them out sometimes. Yeah. Okay, so what you're seeing on here is our PO followed by the online receipt. What's really cool about this is that they can make comments in here if there were any problems with the condition of the box, if it was wet, punctured, that sort of thing. They can make those kinds of references as they go along. And then, of course, okay, I'm going to confess. See this invoice? This happens to be Western equipment. I doctored this before I put it in my presentation. I'm being recorded, right? Can you just cut this part out? Our AP person has 4 rubber stamp things on this piece of paper. 4. One of them put the vendor number on there. Yes, it's already in the system. One of them said that it had vendor batch number, which was already in the system. One was the day he received it, and one was the day he paid it. 4 different rubber stamps. And I had to go in and put it in like paint or something. But I just had to be honest. I had to doctor this. So we're all struggling with these things as we go along. You know, I think that if I took his rubber stamps away, it would probably require some sort of employee assistance program. I do. I think it's his drug of choice. With him, it's rubber stamps. And one of them says City of Linwood at the bottom, but when he stamps it, it doesn't, the bottom part of the letter doesn't. So he gets out a green pen. You think I'm joking? I'm going to so pull it up online later. I'm not joking. I wish I was. Okay, so all of these things can be done electronically. The question is, how do you want to go about doing it? If you're printing, somebody said they were printing their PO, signing it, and then scanning it. Want me to solve that one for you? Or if you want to, print it to Adobe PDF. In Adobe PDF, you can sign it electronically.
But we don't sign it electronically. We take a scan of the picture of the signature and stuff. And I consider that a real signature.
That is, I agree. So you're not wet signaturing and then scanning.
No, if you have something like DocuSign, there's nothing showing that the signature, that the picture that somebody took of someone's signature and carried it over and put it on, there's nothing really showing who did that. Was it the person that launched that signature? Or was it me getting a PO done and it looked like my supervisor signed it?
DocuSign it holds up in a court of law.
Yeah, but we don't have DocuSign.
Oh, gotcha.
Just a picture of the signature.
Right. So you're right. We've got them, by the way, at the bottom of
That's the issue.
that particular PO, that's an electronic signature embedded in the system. I understand exactly what you're saying. Go for it.
So the system that we use, excuse me, right now isn't, we're still going through all the paperwork on the DocuSign, but anyways, it can only be accessed by the person supposed to be signing it through their email.
Correct.
And so as soon as they click approve, it automatically verifies that yes, it's this person and they did it on this day at this time.
Yep.
And so forth, and you can print that report out if anybody questions the legitimacy of it.
One of the things that I mentioned earlier about our directors being a little clenched about these things was that sometimes they wanted to know so-and-so had looked at it first. So let's say you wanted George to look at it first, but Sam's going to sign it. So what you can do is you can set those systems up so that it goes to him for review and it doesn't go forward until he sends his indication that it's acceptable, even though his signature doesn't go on it. But you still have that in the history, that George looked at it before Sam signed it. And that can create that sense of security with the individuals who can sometimes be intimidated by these things. Yeah. Okay. How many of you have a P-card program? Right? Oh, good. A whole lot of you. How many of you are bringing your P-card transactions into your financial system? Yes! Yes, that's excellent. That's a much higher number than I expected. Are you then reconciling those within your financial system? Are your end users going in and adding their receipts, adding their budget coding, that sort of stuff? For the most part. I have a pile of US Bank receipts from, I think it was about June of 2014 when I started at Linwood. And they did it once a month. And they counted on everybody to send their receipts in, which they weren't doing. The one in February was about this big. I would say their compliance rate of sending in their budget coding, they had to go into US Bank. We were with US Bank. They had to put their budget coding in US Bank. And then when the paper showed up, they were supposed to put their receipts on and mail it in. The February one was about this big. I went around the corner in March and I said to the AP staff, where's the P-card transactions? What's going on? And I looked at it. I said, most of them are missing. It was literally only about 20-25% of the receipts were even present. So I had a heart attack and they dragged me. No, not quite. But I knew it was going to look really bad. So I started making phone calls. The AP staff laughed at me. They said, you'll never get compliance. By the end of April, I had 100% compliance just by making phone calls, right? I told them they immediately needed to get me a copy of it or fill out my lost and missing receipt form. Who hates anything more than they hate a form, right? Missing a paycheck, maybe. That might be up there, right? But the idea that they didn't have to, first of all, nobody was even checking. The AP staff had just given up on it. So, the first 60-70% of those folks were easy to get. The last handful, not so easy to get. But I actually started turning off cards. And when the assistant city manager came around the corner to tell me he thought that was a concern, I said, if you get late, I'm going to shut off your card. He called it going to Fitztomb jail. Because I said, you know what? Yes, I know you guys are all my bosses, but I got to protect the city. I don't work for you guys. I work for the city of Linwood and they're its citizens. And they couldn't argue with that. I have to protect that P-card program like every other dollar going out the door. That's my job. And they really couldn't argue with that. Oh, but so-and-so, I don't care if they went to Tahiti for 3 weeks. In fact, I kind of care that they went to Tahiti for 3 weeks. And they should have taken care of things before they left and I've shut their card off. Why, are they going to buy stuff for Linwood while they're in Tahiti? I don't think so. Everybody just loves me at work, can you tell? There's another Fitztomb F that goes with that too, but I won't repeat it in this room. Okay. If you can and you're importing your P-card transactions, that's by far and away the slickest way to do it. Most of our banking institutions will also allow you to have your users log in to the institution and reconcile there. It's klutzier, but if you're still working with paper, the very first thing you want to do is get them scanning their month's worth, week's worth, whatever rate you're transacting at. Get them scanning those and put their paper in the drawer. We tell them 6 months. Send us the scans once a week, once a month, whatever your route is, and just make sure somebody's checking them all. They're checking each and every one that they're there, they back up the transaction, and the barbecue was not delivered to their home address. Right. So if you can, that's another way to do it. Here's an example though, and I wish I could blow this up a little bit, but you got the P-card transaction on the right-hand side. We pull them in daily from US Bank. Monday we pull in Saturday, Sunday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday we pull in the days that post that day. We're getting tier 3 transaction. I know Michelle knows what that is. How many of you know what tier 3 transaction data is? Small handful of you. On this side of the screen, you're seeing, let's see if I can read the initials. Some sort of a dual USB something or other, a black iron 450 street elbow, a black pipe, an iron coupling, a black pipe nipple. I'll stop with nipple. This is individual detail data coming out of Grainger. And we didn't have to get Punch Out going with Grainger. Anybody using Punch Out? Couple people. Punch Out is one of those love-hate relationships I've got. It works in some ways really nice and not so great in others, and it depends on what you're doing. But with Grainger, we're getting this tier 3 data. I made the argument to my finance director that if we had tier 3 data, we didn't need the receipt. I thought she was going to have a stroke. But I actually think there's good argument behind it. We didn't produce this data. We didn't type it in. It came in with the transaction. It's what was on the receipt when they finished their shopping that day. And they probably ordered online, so they probably don't have a paper receipt. I didn't make any headway, but that'll be another day's worth of work. So how about contracting without paper? I didn't see any hands raised when I asked if you guys were still mailing out your solicitations. Anybody struggling with getting your construction and A&E docs out on the web? Construction, because they're so large. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things people trip over these days. And sometimes it's as simple as making sure that you're using a cloud-based system where somebody else is dealing with the volume. There's actually several systems out there that will assist you in doing that. Quite a few of them are over here. We're here in our, you guys talk to any of these vendor folks today that'll do your online solicitations? Now, several of them can handle it. A lot of us in Washington State, we're using Builders Exchange for years and years, but that one's kind of fallen away. What's that? Actually, you're not gonna believe my workaround. I'm in a system right now called GovQA. Anybody heard of GovQA? Okay, this is not a document management system intended for solicitations. It's actually my other hat, public records. And GovQA is a public records request system. But it's a cloud-based system and has unlimited ability to take our construction docs. So you ready for this? We're essentially putting in a public records request against ourselves for our own doc and then posting it to the web. You know, sometimes you got to get creative. But it stopped us from paying for a system that was not serving us anymore. And as I said, we're looking to put something in place, we hope by the end of this year, that will be a little more properly positioned to manage our docs. Receiving bids and proposals. Again, the same organizations that were sitting out here today. I picked up a couple of business cards for them while I was over there today. There's literally dozens of them in the marketplace. And they can help you not only post your solicitations, but lock up the bids, the proposals, and even quotes if you want them to. One of the things we've tripped across is the difficulty of if I post it to the web, and I'm on vacation and the day it opens, can Michelle open it for me? So there's a few things like that I haven't figured out yet. Who in this room is accepting bids electronically? Nice. Are you able to have other people open them? Public sourcing? Who you're using? Public purchasing? Procureware? Planet Bids. Guys happy with them? Good, I'm gonna call all of you. Because I gotta do this year as well. Some of you have already called and irritated, but I'll call you again and irritate you again. Contract negotiations. You guys are probably doing this electronically, maybe without thinking that you're doing it electronically. Sending Word docs or spreadsheets back and forth and asking for edits and, right, comparing docs. That's electronic business actions for sure. You're able to actually track, particularly where our attorneys are concerned. We can track minute changes in language that mean a lot on indemnity and termination and, well, who wants to go into the top 10 list of what we negotiate? Not me. Contract execution. Has anybody used something besides DocuSign or VeriSign for contract signatures electronically? Anybody using Adobe for that? Nope. It is an option for you. I think we have at my organization 6 seats for DocuSign, something in that neighborhood. Yeah, we're using it internally for signature docs like you saw for a delegation of authority. My records manager uses it to get permission to dispose. You know, signing off, it's 6 years old, the contract's been closed 6 years, you can get rid of the records now. So she can send those kinds of things out. I think I have 6 for my department. I'm trying to remember how much I paid last year. Several, less than 10,000. I know it was less than 10,000. Yeah, and if you've got a larger organization, you can leverage some decent pricing on those. Anybody using VeriSign? Nobody? Are they out of business? I know they were around for a long time. Anybody familiar with where they're at? Nope. That's another online signature tool that maybe isn't there anymore. It was 4 or 5 years ago when I started looking to put one in at Linwood. And contract administration. You can issue contract amendments and have those signed electronically. You can enter stuff for your, we started trying to get the approval for vouchers and payroll. How many of you have to send that to your council for approval? You know, every couple of weeks, you're sending all of those through. Those were wet signatures. We're getting those done. We produced the document in Adobe, routed in DocuSign, and the whole thing's electronic instead of a pile like this. It's definitely helped reduce the overall burden. Okay, so you're posting your solicitation, then you're addended to the web. I didn't see anybody who, well, there weren't very many of you. There were a couple who said you weren't doing that yet. Any particular reason you're not posting them to the web? Anybody want to share why they don't? No, you're not in the mood, that's okay. You don't have to talk. It's not a counseling session.
Before we got our website, the county's website was pathetic. I mean, the best way, it wasn't meant for a large agency. It was meant for a little.
Yeah, that's a common challenge.
And it was really difficult to get things on and we like
We're getting ready to replace our website as well, and our current version of posting stuff to the web has you drill in and drill in and drill in, and then you have to add digital assets, and I don't know, it's the weirdest app I've ever seen, which is why we're using our public records app instead. I know. Sometimes workarounds, though, are what you guys have, and that's kind of one of my big points today. Don't be afraid to look for that workaround. Your system, your financial system isn't going to do it all for you. So those of you who are already using electronic bid submittals know that these things can auto tab for you. They can tell you right off the bat what kind of results you get from your bids. That can be very valid. Of course, you still have to go do your responsibility check. But responsive can be significantly improved by setting up those base requirements. If they didn't fill out this and they didn't answer that or whatever, they can't even hit submit in most of these. So you're not spending so much time trying to deal with some irregularity you don't know if you can waive or not. They either did it right or they didn't, because it's not going to come through if you set it up properly. Award notices go right out on the same system. Again, we're having to post those individually on our website, and it's a clunky thing to do. And you can choose oftentimes to get into a local cooperative. If you're not able to use your own website, there's probably in Washington State, we have something called WEBS, Washington Electronic Biz. Thank you, ladies. It can be really useful, but it's not the world's best tool either. So, but there are oftentimes cooperative opportunities for you to post if your own isn't working very well. So when you've got this going on, you can track your spend on your contracts. Right now, the system that I've got, even though it's definitely built for small organizations, I'm able to track purchase order spend as well as P-card spend against a contract. And that has enormous value to me. I can see when I go to resolicit what kind of usage we've had. And if we're pulling down tier 3 data from somebody like Grainger, I actually know what products we're buying without relying on them to send me a usage report. It helps me plan for expirations. Who back at the office has 0 expired contracts? Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, it just doesn't happen. We're dependent on cooperative purchasing. We're dependent upon our end users to get us specs, to give us feedback that they even need a contract to be done. So we always are struggling with expired contracts and spend we can't manage. So the opportunity to be able to plan for those expirations and get a buyer report that tells me what's going to expire, what is expired, because let's be honest, there's always something. What's expired, what's expiring in 6 months, what in 12 months, what's not expiring for more than 12 months. Huge opportunity again. Remember I said you can't manage what you can't see? This part's a big deal. To be able to also look at it in terms of that end user can go look up when is his contract expiring, pop up a copy of the contract, and all of its amendments are right there in one place. Well, our particular system has something called Contract Central, but most of them have something that's reserved for your central users. They can get in and do stuff and manipulate the data in a way that the end users can't. So if you're looking to put together a system that you don't already have in place, make sure that your end users can see what you're accomplishing. Shouldn't be able to edit it, I'm not asking you that, but to be able to see it and pull it down and have reference, hugely valuable. Please.
Does your system actually track the spend on the contract and notify you if you're getting close to the limit? It
does indeed. So we set up for our IDIQs, indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery, whatever that one is, IDIQ. For those, we put an estimated amount on there that's in about probably somewhere around 15% more than we expect the spend to be. So there's something really wacko comes through, it gets slowed down. But it may be acceptable. Maybe they're just buying extra furniture. They're replacing everybody's desks or something, in which case we can increase the contract value to let it go on through. So yeah, and then of course on the not to exceeds, it stops them cold.
Right, and can the purchasers pull that up to have a current available?
Yeah, in our Contract Central, they can see what's been spent, what hasn't been spent, what's encumbered, how much of that contract value has been encumbered versus what's still available for encumbrance. Yep, shows all those things. So electronic signatures, we've talked quite a bit about this. Don't forget to, if you've already got it, and a lot of you do, start thinking about how you might track things internally. Right now, you're probably out there publicly facing, getting folks to sign contracts, except other municipalities. How many of you noticed that? My hardest things to get signed electronically are other government agencies. Our fire district, a regional fire district around us, acted like we were from Mars when we asked him to. I'll be over this afternoon to sign it, he said. Whatever. Okay, fine. Drive over here. I'm okay with that. But actually, you can use it so much more. I showed you one that we were using here for the delegation of authority. And those are living documents, by the way. Every time a staff member changes over, we sometimes, you know, we're changing our org. Things are breaking out this way and that's being consolidated, and it's an ongoing process. So whenever those are changed and updated, we can get those updated in a day. And then I send them off to IT and IT puts the security piece in for the next requisition that comes through. It's pretty slick, and it makes people feel like they know what they're doing and that they should be doing it. Acceptance is becoming a lot more common. For those of you that aren't using electronic signatures, what's holding you back the most? I heard somebody say it's expensive. Getcha. What coming after the cost of it is holding you back? You need a resolution to do it? Says your, say it out loud, city attorney. State law? You guys are forbidden by state law?
According to the attorney, probably.
Well.
God love our attorneys.
City, that the municipalities of yours are authorized and others aren't, like us. So
Okay, who wants to guess what president, sorry? Want to try one more?
It's disallowed, instead the law doesn't specify that we are allowed.
This is where I always get into it with attorneys. What he's saying is, his attorney's saying it doesn't say in the law that you can do it. I'm actually going to give you a law that says you can do it, but it's federal, it's not state. But the bottom line is, this is what we hear all the time. How do we know that it's legal? And I always turn around and say to that same attorney, how do you know that wet signature's legal? How do you know it's not Walt Disney? I could have signed Richard Nixon on that. And then when you see a scribbled signature, you usually can't read it. Am I right? They're full of beans. And I think some part of them knows it. And it's hard because, by the way, the laws were not intended to be permissive. Tell them there's also not a law that says you're allowed to breathe within the state of Washington. Breathe, TH, not D, breathe. Sorry, that didn't sound good. But the bottom line is, laws were meant to be restrictive, not permissive. But who knows what president it was that signed the federal bill into law that electronic signatures were to be enforced in courts. Bingo! Sue got the, well, I don't have a prize, but Sue got the prize. It was Clinton. Dear God, how long ago was that? Is it really 25 years? It's like the paperless procurement office. Yeah, right, I'm not gonna live to see that either. But we're getting closer. We're getting closer all the time. Okay, so what tools are you gonna use to make this happen? Do look first to your financial systems. Why? Because that's where your budget authority is going to be living. You've probably got all kinds of reasons why that's going to be your best tool. But it may not do everything for you. It's not going to help you post 157 pages of bid docs to your web. It's not, if it does, call me and tell me you got one. Electronic signature, right? You can make that happen with a commercial tool. You probably already have Adobe. And if you have an Adobe Pro type setup, you can have an even more robust electronic system there. And web-based solicitations are there as well. So what do you need these tools to do? You got to have usernames. You're not going to have workflow. You can't set up authorities. But think about it. Again, this is where you're going to have this data to make any electronic system work in whatever you buy. Commercial software, something you already own, something you want to own, you're going to have this data, period. And you're going to have to be able to keep it up, which means you probably need your IT folks in the mix for that, right? User verification. You have to be able to know that when they're logging into the web and logging into their Outlook or whatever they're using, that they are who they say they are. Vendor database. You're going to have to know that that's up and current and being managed properly. You want to know that they're publicly accessible. Can you get this stuff posted? Does it make sense? And you need to communicate with private vendors if what you're doing is going to affect them. So why your financial system? It's going to have most of that in it already. It's going to have your users. It's going to have your budget codes. It's going to have your adopted budget amounts. It's going to want to know where the encumbrances are. It's probably got everybody's emails in it, right? So if at all possible, try to leverage your financial system. There may be modules that are available for your system that nobody thought about even looking into. So if you've got a finance manager or director who's happy with their financial system, you expect you're gonna live with it a while, at least look there first before you go out and buy a standalone system. You also know that it's going to be familiar to your end users. So remember me mentioning earlier, you want to manage your change on this? If you can leverage your existing financial system, people are going to know the buttons, they're going to know the lingo, they're going to know the look and feel of it. And if they're already familiar with a tool, they're going to be more willing to accept change. And many of them have built-in workflow systems. Maybe they're doing journal entries. Maybe they're producing AP invoice batches, and they're already using some kind of workflow within their system to do that. So you'd be leveraging existing tools they have. Makes it easier to sell. Disadvantages: less likely to be open to your vendors. Not impossible, but less likely for them to be able to get in and pull out a PO and to send you electronically an invoice and into the system as opposed to into your email. And it may not integrate with other systems, like that online system where you want to receive bids, or an online system where you're registering your vendors. May not automatically integrate, but do at least take the time to look there first. The open marketplace is flooded with solutions for these kinds of problems. I'd say Google it, but you already know that, right? Take the time at these events in particular. If you're going to Forum in Austin this year, take the time to see what they have to offer. Don't be afraid to ask for demos. Don't be afraid to ask your colleagues what they're using and what's working and not working for them. And then figure out what fits for you. Because what fits for me is not going to be the same as what's going to fit the best for you. But the more you talk to your compatriots who've already put it in place, who have the next one, the next obstacle that they're overcoming, the more you'll be able to learn and leverage their experience. Plan which processes are going to live in which system. One of the biggest struggles we had with software here over the last maybe 10, 15 years was the idea that somehow a system could be all-encompassing. It was going to manage everything from payroll and medical benefits to contracts online. And I think there was really good thinking behind that, but I think sometimes you sacrifice functionality for integration. And one of those key pieces you're going to want to look carefully at is what's the right things to actually integrate, and where can you use an import of data in place of trying to use a poor tool that's already integrated. Again, you're going to have to look at your systems, your functionality, and see what works the best for you. But the reporting potential, we've hit on some of these earlier. Spend analysis. To be able to say to somebody, this is what you're using more of. You went out and you said you were going to buy 12 of these a year, but you bought 43. You said you were going to buy 20 of those, but you didn't buy any. So let's make sure when we go out to bid again, we're bidding the right items. So because those vendors know our spend, right? And if we put out the wrong quantities in our bids, they're going to put a nice big fat margin on the things we've got wrong and an itty bitty margin on the things we got right. They know how to work that stuff. Excuse me. Budget status and planning. How many of you are trying to get your agency to work with you when they put their budgets together so when they go to buy it, they have enough money to cover the purchase? If you can look at this kind of spend and talk to them about it, you can get in at the ground level where they're planning their budget. To know what their history is and be able to explain it to them opens those doors, because now you're starting to understand their operations, where they live, what they're trying to achieve. And the more that you can support them, the more you're going to have that relationship going with your customer. So how are you going to manage this change to electronic? The first things you're going to want to do is look at the processes you have in place. I don't mean your software. I mean your processes. I'm talking about my dude in AP with 4 different stamps. So he's getting an invoice electronically, printing it out, and stamping it, putting it in a pile, and a couple days later he stamps it again with a different stamp. There's a new system, a really slick system, It's not going to fix that. So you need to understand when you're going forward what you're going to be able to really achieve. I don't truly have a paperless procure-to-pay process, but I have been able to knock down an awful lot of these. And that's what I want you to be thinking about as you go forward. Which ones can you knock down? Which ones do you think are going to deliver the biggest bang for the buck? And think about it from go meet with your customers. Ask them what their pain points are. Any of you go out and meet with your customers like annually or biannually, or do customer service surveys? Then you may already know what their pain points are. Find one of those that you think you can fix. And yes, make it an easy one for you too. Because you want to be able to deliver a win that's going to help get them on board for the next one, which might not be quite as easy. You need some champions at the top of your organization. Is that your director? Is that your mayor? Is that your county executive? Is that your CEO? Who is that? And can you get them on board? If you got somebody in upper management that's speaking lean and business process improvement and, you know, strategic and all of those kinds of keywords, there's your champion. Go get them. They're going to help you not only find the opportunity to get your voice heard with your customers, but if you need it, and eventually you will, budget to put a new system in place. Have a clear work plan. Guys good at working through lots and lots of challenges. We get them laid on our desk and we get them dumped in our email. More dumped in my email than on my desk, I'll be honest. Every day we get these challenges. So how do you approach something that's project oriented? If you've got project management skills, good on you, go for it. But if you don't, approach this as a formal project. Say to yourself, what do I need to plan first? What are my next phases after planning? Who do I need to get on board? Who are my stakeholders? Think about this like you would be if you see your project managers out in the field working all that time. You have a project even if you take on a little one, just a little one, write yourself a work plan and get good at them, because it'll remind you to do things that you think about at 11 o'clock at night. Now you got to sit up and make a note, right? Or send yourself a text. You're going to want a clear communication plan. What is it you're going to change? When are you going to change it? What are you asking them to change? Right? And expect it to be imperfect. It's going to be imperfect. So if you've got staff members who are working with you on this, be prepared to catch them when they get flack or when something doesn't. How many of you put some kind of electronic system in place, right? You've been through a financial implementation, or did it go perfect? And if you said yes, you're lying. Or you're completely deluded. Maybe you're deluded. Maybe it just pushed you right over the end and you're deluded. Right? Expect those imperfections. So make sure your departments, your contractors, your end users of all types, people aren't connecting to you on this. Connect to your vendors, find out what their pain points are, right? If their pain point is, I'm not getting paid on time, I will tell you quite honestly, my first answer is, you take a P card? Because my end users, if they can pay with a P card, they will. Last year, we did over 10,000 of our payables transactions through our P card and less than 6,000 across our accounts payable desk. Nice. We're going to take him completely over, him and his rubber stamps. He's my best seller for the P card program. He really is. He has no idea he's my marketing agent. Okay. What do your customers want? What are their pain points? What do they want you to fix? I put together something called our contracting Kaizen. If you guys do the lean lingo, you know, a Kaizen is just putting a bunch of people in a room together and solving problems, right? And I listen to them, and then I could take that to my champion and say, look, they all want this fixed, not just me. Shouldn't just be your idea. It needs to be for the benefit of everybody. Get their participation, and if you can, get them to help you test those systems as you before you go live. Okay, what did that go? Oh, great. I'm almost to the end, of course. Oh, so if I go backwards this way, we'll keep No, of course not. I'm getting there. So much for me being like all in control of technology, right? Okay. So find your quick wins. This is the part I mentioned earlier about managing the change. Prioritize your wish. I did not touch it. All right, good. I want to do this, yeah.
Messing with you.
Didn't touch anything. God, it's like, I can see my husband going, I bet she touched something. All right, so find your quick wins. Prioritize your wish list, because your wish list and your customers are going to be different. Figure out where those connect, go for those. Use your colleagues in your agency and in your profession. Call those other arms. Do you see all those arms up in here today? Call the ones that you know, call the ones that you don't know, but you want to get to know because they're doing something and you need to learn how to too, right? If there's one thing that I have learned in my more than 20 years of working in public procurement, if there's one thing I've learned is that we have some of the best professionals in any part of our public agencies that I know of, because inevitably, even the ones I don't like and that don't like me will help me when I call. Right? Has that been your experience? You can call me if you want to, but you know I'm going to push the wrong button. So fair warning. But if you have interest in pursuing this, reach out to your colleagues. Figure out what's going to work and how you can get that support. Areas for top wins. The biggest one, you're going to hear it again and again and again from vendors and from your end users. I can't get things paid, right? Tell me you haven't already heard that. Can't get the bills paid. Work on your AP and your P card processes. Make them as friendly as you possibly can. And you will thrill people. You'll thrill the vendors who don't want to do business with us because we're so bloody slow in paying our bills. Right? You're going to make your end users happy because they don't want to spend their time chasing invoices in circles. They got more important things to do like the rest of us do. Web posting of solicitations. This can have an unexpected assistant or an unexpected support for you. Your council members, your board, whoever you're reporting to that you have to take your contract awards to. The more transparent you are in getting stuff posted out there that you've been free and open in the competition, the more likely they are to gain trust in you. And what follows trust? Collaboration. Get the trust of your customers, the trust of your vendors, and the trust of your elected officials, and you'll get their collaboration. You'll get savings from on-contract spend, and you'll get people to do more spend on your contract. You can also put training online and on demand. So there's a lot of great systems now where you have a staff member that usually has to be the one to go out and sit at somebody's elbow and teach them how to use the system, right? Record it, post it on your intranet. This is how to do a requisition. Here's how to reconcile your P-card transaction. Here's what to expect when you're an evaluator on a proposal. You get those things recorded, and you'll be surprised how much people can use them. And your staff can then turn around and say, here, look at Reg, watch this video. When I was at King County, we had the P-card program. You had to come to P-card training before you could get your P-card. I'm keeping it right here until you show up for training, right? But you can put that online. Have you guys already put it online, Michelle? Not yet. She's going to do that when she gets back to Seattle. Okay. So and then of course the last part of it is sustain these improvements. You got to put improvements in place that can work and that you want to make sure are still working 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line. So you got to check back in. Are those customers and their pain points that you thought you were addressing, did you actually address it, or did you just move that point down the line somewhere, right? Find that out. Find that out. You need that trust that you're going to check back in with them. Any of you guys at the customer service presentation a little bit ago? He was talking about following up with people a month later, a year later. Do it. They want to know that you're willing to listen. Watch the marketplace for the new tools. Just as soon as you get one in place, they're going to come up with something cooler, right? In 1987, I bought a 286 and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And within about 4 months, it was replaced by the 386. And we spent, are you ready for this? $3,800 in 1980s. Yeah, it was out of date in like 4 months. It was really pathetic. But there was this new company called Microsoft that had put out this thing called Works. And we thought we just died and gone to heaven. This was really cool. But we wouldn't let anybody have food or water within about 10 feet of it. And yeah, it just keeps changing. And it's going to keep changing. So keep an eye on the marketplace because it's going to keep going. Reevaluate your needs regularly. Keep doing those customer service surveys that you've been doing. Listening to them. Listen to your team, listen to your cohorts in finance and throughout your executive staff. What's tripping them up? Go for the next one and the next one and the next one. Because if we do continuous business process improvement, then we will, I know, it sounds crazy, turn around the concept that government workers aren't worth the powder. Because I will tell you that's not my experience. Like this profession, across my organization, it was true at the library district, it was true at the transit district, it was true at the county, and it's true at Linwood. I would tell you with great confidence that a good 90% plus of the employees in my organization today, and in all of those I've been in all of those decades, want and do terrific work. Yes, then there's the guy with the rubber stamp. But you know what? He's the minority. And I think big companies, Amazon and Boeing and I don't know what, Alibaba, everybody, they all have somebody. Maybe they don't have rubber stamps, but they've got those kind of characters in their organization.
Remember that the person with the rubber stamp has probably been told by someone to do it 20 years ago and he just got rewarded for it.
Yep.
He just keeps doing it for that next reward.
And you've got a good point. There may have been something in the past. When I asked him why, because I actually supervised him for 6 months last year, temporarily while the manager was out. And he said, well, I don't have to do it, but I'm not going to stop doing it until somebody tells me I have to stop. Because I just left him with his rubber stamps. He wasn't permanently going to be my employee. I was just supposed to kind of keep an eye on him. Yeah, so it can be tough. Some people don't want to change. And some people need to literally have a list of, this is how your new process looks. I do. I think we all know somebody like this. I got to do this, so I'm going to get out my instructions to do it. Every time they do it, and they've been on the job for 12 years. They get out the instructions every time. And he's one of those. He will get out his instructions every single time until somebody tells him to change his instructions. He's not going to change his process. I just got to convince my co-manager over here to change his business process. Or I can just keep like putting up fake documents in my PowerPoint. I can do that too. But you're right, there's a lot of these things are embedded in people's way of doing business. And we have to be thoughtful. When you're working with these kinds of changes, you're going to get resistance, and sometimes that resistance can be substantial. And I'm not going to tell you got to tackle every single one of these. I haven't solved the guy with the rubber stamp either. And I may never. Yes. Yes. And it's been 5 years since we went into a new financial system, but I think he's still doing that. He's still acting as though he did 5 years ago with the old system. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. If you guys are like me, you cannot wait to friggin' get out of here. That being said, oh, thank you. My name is Murder to Spell. If you have follow-up questions and you want some assistance on any of this in any way, please drop by. I've got a pile of my business cards over here. Or give me one of yours and I'll email you, then you don't have to learn my name. Thank you, and see you tonight.
Thank you, Karen, very much.
Oop. Oh,
Also, be back over here at 6:30 for dinner.
you guys
and
listening?
be dressed
6:30 for dinner.
with your costume for 80s tonight.
Thank you.